The Smiths had moved to Willow Creek Estates 6 years ago, drawn by its immaculate lawns, tree-lined streets, and the promise of quiet suburban bliss. For Emily Smith, a freelance graphic designer, it had seemed like a dream come true, a safe haven where her daughter, Lily, could play outside without fear, and where neighbors smiled politely across freshly painted fences. Lily, 12 years old, was bright, curious, and fiercely independent despite being wheelchair-bound due to a rare neuromuscular disorder. For Emily, this community promised a sense of normalcy, a chance for Lily to have the childhood she deserved. At first, Willow Creek felt like an episode of a perfect family sitcom. On weekends, families strolled down the sidewalks, greeting one another with smiles and friendly chatter. The neighborhood pool shimmered under the sun, a communal oasis where kids splashed and parents lounged with coffee. It was in this pool that Lily discovered her love for water. The pool wasn't just a place to cool off. It was a sanctuary where her disability didn't define her. For Lily, the water made her feel weightless, free from the constraints of her wheelchair, where she could truly be herself. Everything changed the day the Smiths met Karen Jensen, or, as the neighborhood would eventually come to know her, HOA Karen. She was the type of person who didn't just follow the rules. She was the rules. With her perfectly coiffed hair, manicured nails, and a gaze that could pierce through steel, Karen had been on the HOA board for over a decade, and she wielded her authority like a scepter. The first time Emily saw her, Karen was measuring the distance between two hedges on her morning walk, clipboard in hand, muttering under her breath about standards and community aesthetics. Karen's obsession with perfection was subtle at first. She would leave notes tucked into mailboxes, politely reminding residents to rake their leaves, or trim hedges to precisely 6 inches. Emily initially laughed off the notes, thinking Karen was harmlessly eccentric, but soon the notes became more personal. Dear Ms. Smith. One letter read in elegant cursive, the pool toys left out overnight are unsightly. Please ensure compliance with HOA guidelines. Another warned that Lily's wheelchair access ramp was too wide and visually disruptive. Despite being fully compliant with safety standards, Emily tried to reason with Karen, hoping a friendly conversation would resolve the tension. But Karen was unyielding. Rules are rules, she said coldly, her voice clipped. We all have to maintain the standard. Her tone left no room for compromise. And Emily realized this wasn't about aesthetics, it was about control. As the weeks passed, Karen's surveillance of the Smiths intensified. She patrolled the neighborhood with an almost military precision, her gaze lingering a fraction too long on Lily playing in the yard or Emily setting up pool floats. She would peer over fences, jotting down notes on her clipboard, muttering complaints under her breath. Children laughing too loudly, Emily once heard her whisper, disturbing the peace. Despite Karen's scrutiny, the Smiths tried to carry on with life as normally as possible. Lily spent hours in the pool, practicing strokes she'd learned in therapy and inventing elaborate water games. Emily took pride in her daughter's determination and joy, cherishing these small moments of happiness amid Karen's looming presence. The pool became a place of refuge, a place where Emily could temporarily ignore the constant tension brewing in their once idyllic neighborhood. But Willow Creek had a way of turning tranquility into pressure. HOA meetings, once infrequent and mundane, became battlegrounds for control. Karen dominated every session, dictating policies with an iron hand. She challenged minor violations with dramatic flair, often humiliating residents in front of the board. Her presence was suffocating. One wrong move, one misaligned flower bed, and she would descend with a wrath that bordered on theatrical. That Emily watched the neighborhood change under Karen's influence. Neighbors who once exchanged smiles began exchanging wary glances, fearful of being targeted. The sense of community that had drawn the Smiths to Willow Creek was eroding, replaced by anxiety and silent resentment. And yet, Emily refused to let Karen's tyranny define their lives. She fortified their home with subtle acts of rebellion, decorative garden gnomes in non-compliant positions, bright pool toys that violated Karen's aesthetic sensibilities, and whimsical holiday decorations that refused to follow HOA guidelines. Lily, oblivious to most of the tension, laughed in the water, her joy echoing across the emptying pool deck. She had learned to read the neighborhood dynamics in her own way, understanding that Karen's frowns and pointed stares were part of a game she didn't need to play. Yet Emily worried. She knew Karen's obsession with control could escalate. She had seen glimpses of it in the way Karen handled disputes, the way she smiled smugly when someone failed to comply with a rule, the way she relished small victories over her neighbors. It was during one of these quiet afternoons, with Lily floating blissfully in the pool and Emily sipping iced tea on the deck, that Karen made her first verbal confrontation. She appeared at the fence, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. "Ms. Smith?" she called out, voice carrying across the yard. "The pool water looks unacceptable. I suggest you do something about it before it becomes a health hazard." Emily forced a polite smile, trying to diffuse the tension. "We maintain it regularly," she replied. "Lily loves the pool, it's safe." Karen didn't smile. Instead, she shook her head, as if Emily's words were irrelevant. "Rules are rules," she said again, her mantra delivered with unwavering conviction. "I'll be reporting this to the board." And with that, she retreated, leaving a sense of foreboding in her wake. Emily felt a chill, one that wasn't from the winter breeze. Karen's words weren't just about water chemistry, they were about power. The Smiths were no longer merely residents, they were targets, and the pool, the very place that brought Lily freedom and joy, had become a battleground. That evening, Emily sat with Lily in her bedroom, watching the sunlight glint off the water outside. "Do you think she'll ever leave us alone?" Emily asked softly. Lily, brushing her wet hair from her face, shook her head. "She doesn't scare me, Mom. The water makes me stronger than her." Emily smiled, a mixture of pride and concern. Her daughter's courage was inspiring, but Emily couldn't shake the feeling that Karen's obsession was growing more dangerous by the day. Something in her gut told her this was just the beginning, that the idyllic suburban life they had dreamed of was about to unravel in ways they could never have imagined. As night fell over Willow Creek Estates, the Smiths' home glowed warmly, against the backdrop of manicured lawns and pristine streets. But somewhere beyond the fence, Karen Jensen was plotting her next move. Clipboard in hand, eyes gleaming with a satisfaction that only control could bring. And in that moment, Emily realized that the battle for her daughter's safety, her family's peace, and the joy of a simple suburban childhood was only just beginning. The tension in Willow Creek Estates had reached a boiling point by the following summer. The sun shone with its usual brilliance, but under its warmth, a storm was quietly brewing. Emily had hoped that Karen Jensen's petty criticisms would fade over time, but instead, they intensified with a calculated persistence that left her both frustrated and unnerved. No longer were the complaints about hedges or pool toys, had begun scrutinizing every aspect of the Smiths' lives. Using the neighborhood rules as her weapon, it started innocuously enough. Karen would leave notes under the door, reminding Emily that the pool's water temperature was slightly above regulation, or that Lily's floating devices were unapproved by the HOA. Emily had learned to chuckle at the absurdity, imagining Karen patrolling the streets with a handheld thermometer, calculating the exact degree of water safety. But the amusement quickly faded as Karen's tactics became increasingly intrusive. She began appearing at odd hours, peering over fences, her sharp gaze lingering on Lily as she practiced her strokes or splashed gleefully in the shallow end. The Smiths had tried to maintain composure, but the constant scrutiny wore on them. Emily noticed that Lily had begun hesitating before heading to the pool. "Mom," she said one afternoon, "what if Karen is watching again?" Emily forced a reassuring smile. "She's just being Karen. We'll be fine." But she knew the truth. Karen wasn't just watching, she was waiting, anticipating a mistake, a perceived violation she could exploit to assert dominance. Neighbors, too, had begun to notice the tension. What had once been a welcoming community was slowly fracturing under Karen's relentless enforcement. Casual waves were replaced by stiff nods. Children whispered about her in hushed tones, trading stories of minor humiliations, like a neighbor being fined for an unauthorized mailbox, color, or a lawn gnome deemed non-compliant. Karen's reign was subtle, yet suffocating, and Emily realized that no one was immune. One humid afternoon, Emily was setting up the pool for Lily, inflating colorful floats and arranging toys in the shallow end. Lily, her hair wet from swimming earlier, wheeled herself to the edge, eager to join in. It was a rare moment of joy, a time when the outside world and its rules felt irrelevant. But the tranquility shattered when Karen appeared at the edge of the fence, clipboard in hand, her expression a mixture of disgust and glee. "Ms. Smith," she called sharply, her voice carrying across the backyard. "I see you've added new toys to the pool. You do realize they are not compliant with HOA regulations?" Emily's jaw tightened. "They're standard floats, Karen. Lily loves them. They don't violate any rules." Karen tilted her head, scrutinizing the floats as if they held some sinister power. "Rules are rules," she said again, her voice laced with venom. "I will be submitting a formal complaint to the board if these items are not removed immediately." Emily sighed and returned to the pool. But the tension lingered like a heavy fog. It wasn't just the floats or the water, it was the underlying message. Karen had begun asserting control over their lives, dictating how they could enjoy their home, their daughter's safety, and even their happiness. Over the next few weeks, the harassment escalated. Karen began filing complaints about noise levels, claiming that Lily's laughter disturbed the peace and decorum of the neighborhood. She emailed the board daily with pictures of pool water she claimed was unsafe, even though Emily tested it diligently with professional-grade equipment. She posted anonymous notes warning that the Smiths were under investigation for repeated violations. The intimidation tactics were relentless, designed not to correct behavior, but to instill fear. Emily tried to fight back, documenting everything meticulously. She kept logs of pool maintenance, emails, and photographs proving compliance with all HOA regulations. She attended board meetings, pleading her case with calm rationality. But Karen's influence over the board was formidable. Members often nodded silently at her accusations, unwilling to challenge her authority openly. The frustration mounted. Emmeline felt trapped, as if the neighborhood itself was conspiring against them. Amid this pressure, Lily began developing her own coping strategies. She refused to make eye contact with Karen and insisted on swimming at specific times when Karen was less likely to patrol the streets. She learned to navigate the pool independently, ensuring she could enjoy it without interference. But the anxiety was creeping into her once uncheckable confidence. Emily noticed subtle signs: hesitation before entering the water, a nervous glance toward the fence, and whispered questions about Karen's whereabouts. Then came the day when Emily realized the situation had crossed a dangerous line. She was in the kitchen, preparing snacks when she noticed Karen loitering near the pool, pretending to inspect the landscaping. Emily's heart sank. Something about the intensity in Karen's eyes felt off, almost predatory. She watched from the window as Karen moved closer to the pool, crouching behind a bush in a way that suggested more than mere observation. The feeling in Emily's gut screamed that this was no longer a battle of regulations, it was personal. The tension reached a peak one Saturday morning. The sun was bright, and Lily had been practicing her strokes, laughing freely in the water. Emily was sitting nearby, keeping watch, when Karen emerged again, her approach deliberate and slow. "Miss Smith," she called, her voice eerily calm, "I think we need to discuss the state of your pool." In person, Emily stood, moving toward the fence, but Karen was already gesturing toward the pool with an almost sinister enthusiasm. "Safety is my responsibility," she said, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "We wouldn't want an accident to happen, now would we?" Emily's stomach tightened. She realized that Karen's obsession had gone beyond control or regulation. There was malice in her actions, a calculated desire to intimidate and assert dominance. For the first time, Emily feared for her daughter's safety, not because of an accident in the water, but because of the deliberate hostility emanating from someone who had infiltrated every aspect of their lives. Neighbors began to notice the tension as well. Some whispered about Karen's behavior, exchanging worried glances when she passed by, but few dared to confront her directly. The Smiths felt increasingly isolated, trapped in a neighborhood where a single person's obsession could dictate the terms of their existence. Emily's attempts to reason with the board fell flat. Karen's influence was too entrenched, her ability to manipulate fear and compliance too effective. Despite this, Emily refused to let Karen win. She doubled down on protecting Lily's joy, ensuring the pool remained a safe haven. She installed extra safety features, kept a close eye on chemical levels, and created a schedule that minimized interactions with Karen, as she knew the harassment was only escalating. Karen's passive-aggressive notes, complaints, and veiled threats were now a constant presence, a dark cloud over every sunny afternoon in the pool. It was in that atmosphere of tension, fear, and mounting hostility that the Smiths would face the moment they had long feared, the day when Karen's obsession turned into direct, dangerous action. The once idyllic suburban life had become a minefield, and Emily knew that nothing would ever be the same. Again it was a scorching July afternoon, and the sun reflected off the pool like a mirror. Lily had spent hours practicing her strokes, her laughter bubbling through the backyard. Emily, ever vigilant, sat close by with a towel and water bottle, soaking in the joy of her daughter's freedom. The pool had become a sanctuary, a place where the pressures of Willow Creek Estates melted away, or at least that was how it felt to them. Karen Jensen, however, saw things differently. That day, she had arrived earlier than usual, her posture rigid, her clipboard clutched like a weapon. Emily noticed her moving suspiciously along the fence, ducking behind hedges, her eyes darting toward the pool. A shiver ran down Emily's spine. Something about Karen's demeanor was different, calculated, almost gleeful. It was the same glint Emily had noticed in Karen's eyes during previous confrontations, but magnified tenfold. But first, Emily tried to rationalize it. "She's just inspecting the neighborhood, nothing more," she muttered under her breath. But deep down, she felt that familiar, growing dread that had been building since Karen first crossed the line into obsession. Lily, sensing her mother's tension, hesitated in the water. "Mom?" she asked softly, glancing toward the fence. Emily forced a smile. "Just ignore her, sweetie. We're fine." But the words felt hollow. Karen's movements became deliberate. She peered at the pool gate, pretending to admire the landscaping. Yet her gaze never left Lily. Her fingers toyed with something small in her purse, something Emily couldn't quite see. The air felt heavy, charged with a sense of imminent danger. Emily stood, positioning herself between Karen and the pool. "Karen, is there a problem?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Karen's smile widened in a way that sent a chill down Emily's spine. "Oh, Miss Smith," she said sweetly. "I'm just ensuring that everything here is up to code. Safety first, don't you know?" Without warning, she reached into her bag and pulled out a bottle. Emily's heart skipped a beat when she realized what it was. a large container of bleach. Before Emily could react, Karen began pouring the liquid into the pool. The strong chemical scent hit immediately, stinging Emily's eyes and nose. Panic surged through her. "Karen, stop," she screamed, lunging toward the fence. But Karen was already halfway through emptying the bottle, her actions deliberate and terrifyingly precise. Lily, caught mid-stroke, froze. She cried out, "Mom, I can't breathe," as the water began to irritate her skin and eyes. Emily didn't think. She wrenched open the pool gate and rushed into the water, scooping Lily into her arms. Lily was coughing, spluttering, her small body trembling as the chemical-laced water burned her sensitive skin. Emily dragged her toward the edge, her mind racing. She had never felt fear like this, not for herself, but for her child. Every second felt like an eternity. Neighbors began to emerge, alerted by the screams. Some grabbed towels and buckets, trying to help, while others called emergency services. Karen, meanwhile, stepped back, laughing softly, as if she had orchestrated the scene for her own amusement. Her laughter was hollow, cruel, and entirely devoid of empathy. Emily could barely process what she was seeing, her daughter, gasping for air, and Karen, standing there with a smug satisfaction on her face, as though the world had validated her twisted sense of control. The emergency responders arrived within minutes, but to Emily, it felt like hours. Lily was treated immediately for chemical exposure, her skin stinging, her eyes red and watery. Doctors assured Emily that, physically, Lily would recover fully, but the psychological impact was another matter entirely. The pool, once a symbol of freedom and joy, now carried an undertone of fair place where innocence had been threatened by cruelty disguised as authority. The neighborhood was in shock. Witnesses recounted what had happened, their voices shaking as they described Karen's actions. Some neighbors expressed disbelief. How could someone behave this way? How could the HOA, which was supposed to foster community, allow such a person to wield power unchecked? The Smiths realized that Karen's obsession was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. HOA board members were forced to respond. Initially, there were attempts to minimize the incident, framing it as an accident or misunderstanding. But Emily had documented everything: photographs of the bleach container, video footage from a neighbor's security camera, and eyewitness testimonies. Karen's denial crumbled under the weight of evidence. Yet even as the board convened emergency meetings, Karen maintained an unsettling composure, her smile unshaken, her tone eerily calm. For Emily, the emotional toll was overwhelming. She oscillated between anger, fear, and disbelief. How had this escalated so quickly? How could someone act with such malice, all under the guise of enforcing rules? She held Lily close, rocking her gently in the hospital room as the girl whimpered softly. "It's okay, sweetie," Emily whispered. "Mom's here. You're safe now." But even as she spoke the words, Emily knew that the sense of safety had been irrevocably altered. The community's reaction was mixed. Some neighbors rallied around the Smiths, offering support, supplies, and words of solidarity. Others remained silent, intimidated by Karen's influence and fearful of retaliation. The incident sparked heated debates at HOA meetings and on neighborhood message boards. People began questioning the authority and accountability of HOA boards, and Karen became the focal point of outrage. Yet, even under scrutiny, she refused to show remorse, insisting that she had only been enforcing safety standards. Emily realized that the aftermath would be more than just physical recovery. It would be a battle for justice, a struggle to reclaim the home, the neighborhood, and the freedom that Karen had tried to destroy. She vowed not to allow Karen's actions to go unchallenged. But she also understood the deeper lesson. This wasn't just about a single act of cruelty. It was about power, control, and the lengths to which some individuals would go to assert dominance over others. That night, Emily sat by Lily's bedside, watching her daughter sleep, the faint smell of bleach still lingering in the air. Her mind raced with plans, legal action, community awareness, and rebuilding a sense of safety. She knew it would be a long, difficult journey, but she also knew they would face it together. Lily had survived, stronger than ever, and Emily was determined that Karen would be held accountable not just for the chemical attack, but for the fear, the control, and the tyranny she had inflicted on an entire family. And somewhere in Willow Creek Estates, Karen Jensen slept soundly, unconcerned with the destruction she had caused, convinced that she had merely done her duty. But Emily understood that the neighborhood's illusion of perfection had been shattered, and with it, the true face of HOA power had been revealed, one of obsession, cruelty, and unrestrained entitlement. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, Emily felt a spark of determination. Lily's laughter might have been interrupted, but it had not been silenced. And as the first rays of dawn filtered through the hospital blinds, Emily made a promise to herself and to her daughter. They would reclaim their sanctuary, confront the injustice, and expose Karen Jensen for the danger she truly was. The days after the bleach incident were a blur for Emily and Lily. Lily's skin gradually recovered from the chemical irritation. Her eyes cleared, and doctors reassured Emily that no lasting physical damage had occurred. But the psychological wounds ran deeper. Lily hesitated near the pool, flinching at even the faintest whiff of chlorine. Emily spent hours sitting by her daughter's side, gently encouraging her, reminding her that the water was safe, and that the pool, the place that had brought her so much freedom and joy, was still their sanctuary. Slowly, Lily's laughter returned, cautious at first, then gradually more confident. By and well, the neighborhood was in uproar. News of Karen Jensen's attack spread like wildfire. Social media buzzed with posts detailing the incident. Neighbors sharing videos and photographs, and online forums dissecting every detail. The HOA board, caught between public outrage and the influence of their longtime member, scrambled to respond. Emergency meetings were held, and Karen was called in to explain herself. Her reaction was a mixture of indifference and denial. She insisted that she had merely acted in the interest of community safety and that the bleach had been intended to sanitize the pool. Her explanation did nothing to quell the anger that had boiled over in the community. Emily, fueled by a combination of fear, outrage, and protective instinct, decided it was time to take action. She contacted a lawyer specializing in civil harassment and personal injury. The attorney was appalled by the blatant malice and recklessness of Karen's actions and immediately began preparing a case for damages and restraining orders. Emily also worked with neighbors who had witnessed Karen's behavior, compiling statements and video evidence to present to both the board and law enforcement. At the same time, Emily and Lily began rebuilding their sense of normalcy. Emily installed new safety features around the pool, including surveillance cameras and secure locks, while reinforcing water safety rules. But the most important work was emotional. Emily helped Lily reclaim her confidence in the water. Day by day, the girl regained her courage, splashing, laughing, and practicing her strokes as she had before. The pool was no longer a place of fear, but a symbol of resilience. The legal process, however, was exhausting. Karen hired a high-powered attorney, claiming that the Smiths were exaggerating and that her actions were within her duties as an HOA officer. The hearing was tense, with both sides presenting testimony and evidence. Emily's heart pounded as she recounted the incident, describing the fear in Lily's eyes, the chemical burns, and the sheer recklessness of Karen's behavior. Witnesses confirmed her story, including neighbors who had seen Karen loitering with the bleach bottle and heard her cruel laughter. The board was forced to acknowledge the severity of the incident, and Karen was suspended from all HOA duties pending the investigation. The community's response was overwhelmingly supportive of the Smiths. Neighbors rallied to show solidarity, bringing gifts, hosting pool days to rebuild a sense of joy, and attending meetings to ensure accountability. Social media campaigns highlighting the dangers of unchecked HOA authority gained traction, sparking broader conversations about the need for oversight and regulation. Willow Creek Estates had been shaken, but the outrage strengthened bonds among residents who had quietly suffered under Karen's tyranny. Through this ordeal, Emily discovered a newfound resilience within herself. She became an advocate for safer community governance, speaking at HOA meetings, writing articles, and consulting with other families who had faced similar harassment. She realized that Karen's actions, though terrifying and deeply harmful, had revealed the importance of vigilance, community support, and standing up against abuse of power. Emily's voice became a rallying point for others who had felt silenced, turning personal trauma into public advocacy. Karen, meanwhile, faced escalating consequences. Her suspension became permanent after an independent review concluded that her actions were reckless, malicious, and entirely outside the scope of any reasonable HOA authority. Legal action moved forward, with civil penalties imposed for the bleach attack, emotional distress, and endangerment. While she initially maintained a facade of defiance, the reality of lawsuits, mounting fines, and public shame began to erode her confidence. The very power she had wielded to intimidate neighbors now worked against her. In the Smiths' backyard, the pool slowly returned to its former glory. Lily swam freely, her laughter echoing across the water once more, a triumphant reminder of the joy that Karen had tried and failed to steal. Emily watched from the deck, tears of relief and pride in her eyes. She had faced fear, malice, and bureaucratic obstruction, yet she had emerged stronger, more determined, and more protective of her daughter than ever. The incident left a lasting mark on the neighborhood. HOA meetings became more transparent, rules were clarified, and residents demanded checks and balances to prevent the rise of another Karen Jensen. The story of the bleach attack was recounted as a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked authority and obsession. Willow Creek Estates, once defined by its manicured lawns and perfect appearances, now carried the memory of vigilance, courage, and community resilience. Emily reflected on the journey from fear to empowerment, What had begun as a malicious attack on her daughter had transformed into a story of strength, advocacy, and justice. She had seen firsthand how one person's obsession could threaten an entire family, but she had also witnessed the power of truth, evidence, and collective action. Most importantly, she had seen Lily reclaim her joy, her laughter ringing louder than ever, a triumphant echo that no Bleach, no rule, and no Karen could ever take away. In the end, Willow Creek Estates became more than a neighborhood, became a community that had endured fear, confronted injustice, and emerged stronger.